Make a little book.
Send it to him. And yeah. Come on.
I'm gonna take it with
He's just not gonna move.
We have to suck in. So my voice will be like this.
Well, Mike, thank you for coming on and doing the podcast, man.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So tell people who you are and what your business is in the Houston area.
Okay, I'm Michael Patterson, and my business is Live Lean RX Houston. So what we do is health and fitness testing, and we have full nutrition services as well. Our nutrition is based on the testing, very similar to college and pro athletes. Our goal was to be able to make that affordable and accessible to as many people in the general public as possible. We're not unique in the business model. But where we are different is that we're not a franchise, and that we are very affordable, and we're local to the Houston market.
Man, so what got you into this field?
That's more based on my personal story than actual professional. So
you lost like a tremendous amount. You were weighing like 350 or 400 at one point, right?
Not that high.
Okay.
But 315 was my
315.
Yeah, when I was 43. So I always, growing up, I was a fat kid. My mom literally said I was born with a pot belly. And the irony is I pretty much grew up on a 10-acre vegetable farm.
Wow.
Yeah, I just had, it was easy for me to store fat. My brother was a track and field star. So I was the trombone player who liked to read books, and I was kind of a geeky kid.
Where'd you grow up at?
Santa Fe, Texas.
Oh, okay, so local.
Yeah.
Not too far from here, huh?
Yeah.
No.
Local Texas boy.
Yeah. So anyway, my brother did get me into running right after high school. I never did really like it, but he was kind of a sprinter, and I got into a little bit of distance, and something clicked when I was about 19, and I started running really obsessively. It didn't have a lot to do with health and fitness. I just really liked it. I could go in my head, and it made me calm. I also kind of have an obsessive personality, so it was a good fit.
So you didn't do any kind of football or tennis or golf in high school?
No. As I said, I was a trombone player in the band.
Okay.
So
what chair though?
usually second or third. I worked hard enough to be able to stay in, but I wasn't really killing.
Sounds like a competitive band you had there.
What does that mean? What chair? What does that mean?
Chair is where when you sign off on your music, you test and show how good you are. You're top. The person who can complete the piece the best is going to be first chair. So it's a pecking order.
Okay. How'd you know that?
I was in the band.
Really?
I played the trombone.
Did you?
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Man, I didn't know that.
Just junior high.
Okay. I don't
Yeah.
So-
Just enough to not know.
Yeah. So my entry into fitness was running. And again, I did it obsessively. It wasn't long. I remember when I went out to the track, and it's the first time I ran like a half mile, and I felt pretty good about it. So I started pushing myself, and pretty soon I was running about 8 to 12 miles every day. I did that for 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was your weight when you first started?
My weight then, because of my growth spurt, I was kind of a late bloomer too. So I wasn't as heavy as I was when I was in my preteens. I was probably about 40 pounds overweight. After about 6 months of running, I was down to about 165.
Wow.
I had, 6 foot. I had that runner's body. I was pretty much skin, bone, and calves.
Did you change the way you ate? While you're running, you just
no. And that's the other thing I liked about running is, there's the cliche that you can't outrun a bad diet. Under 25, you damn sure can.
Can't you?
Yeah, I ate everything. Yeah. So yeah, that lasted until I was 31, and I did several marathons, and life changes. I graduated from college, and career was taking off. And also I remember the day, it was just one day I just didn't want to run anymore. I in my bio on the website, it kind of says it was like Forrest Gump. I really just started running, and I loved it. And then one day I was like, I'm done. Wow. So I really didn't do anything after that. And the rest of my life was, for the next 10, 15 years, was behind a computer screen.
Now, you said you did marathons. What were you pacing?
At my fastest, I was pacing 7s and 8s, but there was a year where I was my fastest pace was right around 6:50.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good.
So,
Do you remember your overall times?
my best time I ever ran, I gotta remember. I don't remember the seconds. It was 2:55. So
Two?
Yeah, 2:55. It was always my goal to run a sub-3 marathon.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. That's a fast one.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Dang.
That's crazy that you were that into it, that, running that quick, because that's a quick time.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden just to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. I had enough.
Did you have kids, or did you get married around that time, or just what prompted you to stop?
Yeah, I was married. And at the time, I was an x-ray tech for most of that time. And then later I'd switched to IT. And that was another thing with my, when I was in x-ray, I went back to school on my degrees in healthcare administration. Never practiced it. It was about that time I got really interested in IT. It was right around the early 90s and the PC revolution, and I wanted a big part of it. So I quit my x-ray job, and I took like a lot of people, because I didn't have a degree in computer science. So I did desktop support, and I moved up pretty quick. I went after my Cisco certifications, did network engineering. And so then I was married. I got married in, 93. And so that was a big part of it. I was also starting to do, not only when I quit running, I was also eating a lot more. Well, I was eating the same amount. I just wasn't exercising anymore, but I was drinking more too. So I was like, yeah, that wasn't too good. So the next, every year from 31 to 43, I put on about 2.5, 3 pounds, sometimes 4 pounds. And it was very gradual. But by the time I was 43, I was, right around 315. And my blood sugar was not in a good place. I was pretty much maxed out on metformin, hypertension, cocktail of hypertensive drugs. And I was like, I'd had enough. And so first thing was, I need to get sober. So did that. That was rough.
How long did it take you to get sober?
Well,
I guess you're never. Do you drink now?
No. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's
No,
never.
I don't drink
It's a journey, right? You're never really sober.
Exactly. Yeah.
How long did it take you? I mean, how much weight did you lose from just cutting out alcohol?
Well, when I stopped drinking, I cleaned up my diet pretty quick too. So it's kind of hard to tell, but it was in the first year, I dropped about 80 pounds. So pretty quick.
It correlates too. Were you a drinker, and then you get tipsy or drunk, and then you want to eat too?
No, I went to grad school for alcohol. So I got to the point where I was just drinking during at night. So and not feeling too good during the day. And I was for a long time a very functional alcoholic. So when I'd go to work, I just wouldn't eat. So I was down to eating like 1 meal a day. Wow. Yeah. So
that's crazy. I guess I haven't hit that. I mean, I don't drink at all, but
yeah,
I feel like if I drank, I would. When I was in my 20s, I would drink and then eat a lot. But I guess when you get to a certain age, you don't really want to eat. You just drink and then you eat one meal, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, it's common.
I definitely want to eat all the time.
I know. Yeah, that's like the thing. You get tipsy, just a little tipsy, and then everything becomes good, even if you just ate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, those are amateurs. You got to push through that.
You're not a real alcoholic.
Yeah.
Push through it.
Yeah.
That's good.
We went way past that, John.
Come on, John.
I know. I'll catch up.
All right. So anyway, that first year, I did not know a lot about nutrition at all. But I did know, obviously, that, alcohol, and then past that, soft drinks, fast food, casual dining, gas station hot dogs were, probably not a good thing. So I cut all that crap out too. And then one of the first books that I came across, because I was like, okay, let me educate myself. And because I'd had by that time, my IT career, I'd moved over into data analysis, and I was working at Johnson Space Center. So because I had a data background, it led me into sports science and sports physiology pretty quickly. And I started reading. But one of the books I read wasn't so much science as, well, it was bro science, but it was Tom Venuto's book, Burn the Fat and Feed the Muscle. And it's kind of a classic. And that made sense to me. He was talking, and he's not a big fan of cutting and bulking. It was about how the macros actually work, and that how you can exercise and actually make the food to your body, to your goal. And later, when I started studying sports physiology, a lot of the things that Tom was talking about, they learned through trial and error, but it was the same practices that college and pros do with testing. So, and I still like the book.
Did that book talk about like eating to your blood type and all that?
No. There's I get into conversations with my clients about that. They come in, the beauty of the internet is there's a lot of information. And the not so good thing about the internet is there's a lot of noise. Let's face it. The internet, first and foremost, is to market you stuff.
Right.
I don't put a lot of, I've done some studies on the blood type thing, and the human genome is another one. People are talking about eating to their genetics and things like that. And there's some science out there behind it, but really it comes down to fundamentals. And, and I think that's not exclusive to just health and fitness. Fundamentals are always there in just about anything that you pursue. Yeah. And that was one of the things in Tom's book, and the same thing in sports science, is you look at food two ways. There's calories and there's macros. Calories just measures quantity. It's how much we eat. Macros measures quality. It's what we eat. You nail those two things, you're 95% home. The other things like carb cycling, intermittent fasting, timing, micronutrients, things like that, they have a place. They do. But, it's kind of, the analogy I use is like gardening. You can get all the, fancy supplements and do things like that. Like people will talk about how they're, especially when I used to grow roses, and people would talk about, I'm using this fungicide and I've got this, Miracle Grow, and it's fine. But if the soil's bad, it's like nothing's going to grow.
Right. Yeah.
But the big thing I got from Tom's book, because as I didn't know about nutrition, I was learning about it. And in that first year, I didn't know a lot about exercise either, except the one thing, cardio. So I went back to running. And that was good. And then I lost more weight, and the internet calls this skinny fat. That term wasn't being thrown around at the time, but that's exactly what I was. I didn't look that good. I felt a lot better, but I had a lot of droopy skin, and I wasn't very strong. I was very fatigued very easy. So when I was 45 years old was the first time I ever walked into a gym.
Wow.
So when I put the strength training together and I stopped doing the long duration cardio, I started doing HIIT cardio. And I did understand macronutrition then, and I got it to fit my body to my goal. I started getting lean and strong really quick. And I found out that literally hundreds of thousands of other people had done the same thing. And it left a mark. And also, I was still I worked another, I guess about, almost 12, 13 years in IT. And I had left Johnson Space Center, and I'd went back to a company I'd previously worked for, and I was previously the IT director, and now I was the CIO. So pretty cushy job, cushy lifestyle. And, but I didn't change what I was doing. I just had to watch when we'd go to the corporate lunches and the expense account, not to fall back into those old habits. But I always had a lot of people ask me, because they knew me previously, they're like, "Is that you? How did you get that way? Why you look really good. What did you do?" So I've been telling this story a long time before I had the business. And then about 6 years ago, I got my first Dexa scan. I'd been an X-ray before. I knew what a Dexa scan was, but I heard these people, a couple of guys where I was working at 24 Hour Fitness, talking about getting a Dexa scan for body composition. So I was like, that's a thing?
What is a Dexa scan for people that are listening?
Okay. So a Dexa scan is dual exposure X-ray I can't stumble on the word. Absorptiometry. Okay. So a Dexa is a type of device. And what it really is a repurposed bone density machine. The machines that we use, generally they're made by GE, but it does 2D tomography, and they've been used for about 40 years for bone scans and bone density testing. GE came out with the software about 14 years ago, And really what had changed was software technology. So now they could get much higher resolution and use it for soft tissue. And the machine itself is ideal for it because it's doing 2D slices and it's extremely low dose. And the way it could be compiled is that it's very accurate and you get a very high resolution and also a very high degree of accuracy.
So an accuracy of what though? Like what are you looking at?
Oh, okay. So in a Dexa body composition scan, what you're getting is we're measuring your body fat, your bone, and your muscle to the 10th of an ounce. Not only do we get the numbers, but we get a high resolution image, and I can show people where these tissues are, so it helps them get their head around it. It also measures their visceral fat. Without getting too complex in all the different types of body fat, but it really falls into two buckets. You have body fat, and that's more of a correlation with how much we eat. That's by design. That's how our body stores excess energy. Anytime that we are taking in more calories than we're expending in energy, we're going to store it as fat under the skin. Visceral fat is not any of the body fat that we feel. It's not under the skin. It's on the other side of the abdominal wall and in what's known as the visceral cavity. It directly around and within your organs. That fat is more based on what you eat. So we measure that as well. And that's another thing we talk to our clients about, the differences in it. It's not unusual. A lot of times I'll get people with okay to slightly elevated body fat. They got a few pounds on them, but their visceral fat's extremely high. Likewise, I've got clients that are medically obese, but their visceral fat's pretty low. So what determines that? Okay, well, especially when you're in a city as large as Houston, we got a lot of affluent and high-income desk jocks. Yep. So it's not uncommon for me the ones that I was mentioning that have pretty good body fat typically are men. They do work behind computers or they have corporate jobs. And they look good in clothes. You would never call them fat. They got a little bit of a paunch. And I measure them and their body fat's 25, maybe up to 30%, which is pretty average and not bad at all. But their visceral fat's 3.5, 4 pounds, which is a lot of the times that's one of the reasons I see them, because one of their healthcare practitioners referred them to me. And so these people are not like constantly eating, but what they do eat is your tacos, barbecue, and throwing in beer and margaritas on top of it. So, and that is the factors in visceral fat that elevate it. It's going to be a high fat, high carbohydrate diet that's also low to no in fiber, not getting enough plant foods, simple sugars, processed foods, and alcohol, especially if you drink it excessively, will skyrocket visceral fat. In fact, when my healthcare providers send me clients, that's the first number they look at off of the entire report. That in labs, they can pretty much tell what someone's consuming. Not the exact foods, but the composition.
What's a normal amount of visceral fat a person should have?
Well, it's kind of based on, there is a ratio to their total body fat and, of course, just their general size. But in general, we like to see under 2 is good. I prefer to get it down to around 1.5 or less. Under a pound is usually where I see really fit people, and under a half a pound is where I see people who are athletic. Under a quarter pound is pretty elite. So once we get over 2 pounds is where we start getting into problems. It'll start from 2 to about 4 pounds. We're going to have metabolic problems. This is where our endocrine system is starting to get suppressed. And let's see, what is the other things? Our cholesterol levels are going to start to be elevated. And also the insulin sensitivity. Sorry, I was stumbling on that. Insulin sensitivity is starting to get high. Okay, so our body's really having to work really hard to keep itself in check. And once we get over 3.5 and 4 pounds, we have all those metabolic problems, but we're also now building a really good foundation for cardiovascular disease. Almost always when someone has 3.5 and absolutely over 4, they're going to have hypertension, because now it's the physical properties of the visceral fat is starting to compete. Visceral fat usually starts down in the lower regions of the intestines, what's known as the mesentery area. And as it increases, it'll start moving in. That's where we start to get fatty liver. And as it increases, then it starts moving up and gets around the heart. Well, when you do that, it's physically putting pressure on the cardiopulmonary system. So you're going to really start having problems.
So that visceral fat, that's what is killing us, basically. That's what obesity is, basically. I mean, it sounds like it's worse than regular body fat.
Well, obesity, I mean, it causes a lot of problems. I mean, the first one's in physics. It's one of the things that now at 57, I'm in really good health. I'm in better health than I was in my 40s, probably my late 30s. My bones are really strong, and but my joints, I've got a lot of joint issues, and that's from when I was overweight. Also, when I was running overweight, things like that really takes a toll on the joints. Also, that your organs are meant to supply what you need to get through the day, as far as your mobility and your flexibility. And once you start piling on fat on top of it, you're just making it work that much harder. But visceral fat is especially bad because of it works and starts being detrimental to the actual physiology itself, especially when it gets intravisceral, which is like fatty liver, and starts messing with that.
Wow, that's intense. So you were at 24 Hour Fitness. You were talking to a couple of guys about the Dexa scans.
Yeah.
And that's
we went off a little bit.
Yeah.
I know that was
a lot of knowledge though.
No, that was
I learned
that was
something.
good. But that is that the Dexa scan, is that what led you to wanting to do your own business?
Yeah, that was that planted the seed. So there was a Dexa Fit. They were one of the first companies. They are and still one of the largest. They are a franchise, and there was one on Katy Freeway that had opened up, and that's where I heard the chatter. So I went and checked it out, and I got a Dexa scan, and I thought, this is really helpful, and I want to schedule one on my side of town, and I'm going to use it for my tracking. There wasn't anything. And then I realized how scarce it was, and then I found out that it was almost all pro sports, they have access, even within their field houses, some of them. A lot of the NFL has DEXA scans within their field houses and training facilities. Colleges were starting to have access to them as well too, but the general public, it was really brand new. So that kind of like, hey, it's like, maybe I'll do that. Didn't really think that much about it. But then the last company that I worked for in IT was also in advertising and marketing. So I started looking at and one of the things I noticed, the second largest company out there to Dexa Fit was Composition ID. Both these companies were doing pretty well. And then I started, the company that I went back to, we got to a point of where the owner wanted to sell it. So, and this was going to be like a 2-year process. And as we were selling, I was like thinking, what do I want to do next? So I started, and a lot of times I do, I worked in data analysis for a long time, so I worked from reduction. I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and now I'm going to start shooting holes in it and figure out why I shouldn't do it. And there were some things, but there was a huge market opportunity. And where I knew I had an advantage is what I saw DexaFit and Comp ID doing was, as far as marketing and advertising, was very little. They had done some things really right out of the gate, but the main thing I found out about the test that not only I do, but they were doing, is that there was a huge awareness problem. Still to this day, everyone that walks through my door, about 35 to 40% of my clients, it's their first scan. It's their first entry to it because they heard. And referrals is a big part of my business now too. So there was a market opportunity, especially in the exact part of town that I just happened to live in. And I knew I'd have an edge and I could move up pretty quickly with the way I was marketing it. And I saw that they were going in a general direction of trying to incorporate other services and really hadn't nailed down the business model they had. One of the things about my business is that, and this is kind of indicative of all things in health and fitness, there's kind of a lifespan of someone. Everybody comes in and out of this a lot. It's kind of like discretionary income. What we decide to spend our money on is what we're interested in. When we're not interested anymore, we walk away.
Right.
Well, health and fitness is one of those things that shares that trait, but probably more so than others. So what that means is that I knew I needed to make it be a volume business, but for the people that I did retain, I needed to have those full services there as well too. So it was kind of like my business plan kind of read like a dichotomy. It was kind of split, but it works. So I'm able to, one of the things I knew is I needed to keep my cost extremely low. And I was able to do that. I'm not the first person in Houston that's bought a DEXA scan. our Dexa scanner. The machines cost new about $70,000. You can pick them up used 40 or 50. So there's been a few gym owners and dozens of doctors in town that have bought these to get in that business. What they don't realize is that client acquisition is expensive, and you've got to be really good at it because it's a numbers game. Most people don't know about it, so you have to educate it. I tend to use social media for my awareness campaigns, and I tend to use Google because that's where we go when we're ready to buy something.
Right.
So that worked out pretty well for me. That being said, it was always intended just to be a part-time job because I had actually retired from IT in a pretty good place. IT was good to me for a lot of years, and I wanted something where I could do part-time. And it was doing that. I had projections for myself, and I was hitting about 85% of those projections when COVID hit. And we shut down for 41 days. And during that, the lockdown, like a lot of business owners, I did not know what the world was going to look like when we were opened back up. And when we did open up for the first few days, it was really slow. No one was calling. I'm like, okay, maybe people are repositioning and they're hunkering down still at home, or they're still acting like it's a hurricane party. It was about 4 or 5 days right before the weekend, the phone really, really started ringing like it was before. And then we started booking up like a week in advance, 100%, and that has not stopped.
Now, imagine with COVID, everyone had to gain weight, right? I mean, everyone stayed home, so I imagine they want to like reboot, even fitness people, right?
Yeah.
Even people that were into fitness pre-COVID, they probably gained a good amount of weight and researching. And if you're throwing ads on Google too, so that had to help.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was like, the whole world was freaking out. And for instance, in my own neighborhood, I saw neighbors because, again, while we were all at home, people were walking, and that was kind of infectious too. I saw neighbors in my neighborhood walking that I literally hadn't seen in a decade. Well, after COVID, a lot of those this feels pretty good, and they kept doing it. So COVID created a new health consciousness in the country. Oh yeah, and I think that's the silver lining, and it's been great. I don't know how long it'll last. We kind of have short-term memories in this country, but I'm going to ride it as long as I can. So it's brought me in. The thing about it too, what I noticed is the other thing that shifted was the workplace. Past the lockdowns, even still going through that, a lot of people that were flexible now had greater flexibility in their jobs, their hours, and their work from home. And a lot of people that previously weren't working from home were able to. So they now had time to be able to work out. And as far as the types of clients that I get, I'm in an area, and I knew it was going to be high, but I didn't know it that high. But about 35% of my clientele is semi-pro or pro bodybuilder. I've got a pretty healthy collection of endurance athletes as well. And then about 20 to 25% are heavy weight loss clients. And then everything in between is kind of where COVID filled in the gap. Because I really don't have, other than the semi-pro and pro athletes and my weight loss clients, it really was a mix. But what's synonymous with every person who walks in the door in that 40% is that they just want to do something. They generally have already started working out, correcting their diet, and they want to know how to get to that next level. And those in the weight loss clients are my favorite. Transformation clients are my absolute favorite because I go there. One of my favorite things of all the types of clients that I talk with and why I've been able to connect with them is a lot of times I'll get people come in there, and I got two things working for me. One, I'm old, and two, I'm fit. So when I've got younger people in there and they're looking at a guy that's 57 and, I don't look like I sit and watch TV and eat chicken wings all day. They're naturally, because one of my rules is like personal trainers. It's like, if I got more muscle than you, I'm not probably going to pay you to train me, especially if you got a gut on you.
You're a good example.
So yeah, it's a good example. But I also get with my weight loss clients, and sometimes it gets very emotional. And they'll say, it's like, oh, this is good, but you just really don't understand. And I'm like, but I do. I always share my story. It's not like the first thing we talk about when we come in, but when people ask anything about me, I'm going to tell them that. They need to know where I came from, because those people truly have my heart, and I can help them. Everything in life, or at least I believe, is will and skill. And a lot of these people come in with the will, and it's like, I'm going to help them get that skill. And even my nutrition services are set up that way too. I try really hard to untether, I call it untethering, my clients. People are exponentially more successful if they learn to manage their own health. And I help them do that.
That's awesome. A lot of people, they think there's some type of magic science to it or some magic trick. But if they're seeing you said you're 57 and you were over 300 pounds at one point, that speaks to people. It's like, oh, well, he was there. It's not some 25-year-old who's doing body shows on the weekends telling them, oh, no, this is how you do it.
Right.
So, kind of leveling the playing field with your clients and saying, no, this wasn't me. I'm sure you got pictures of you, how you looked before in your studio.
No, actually I don't.
You should add those.
Yeah, I wish I did. I've only got one picture with me that overweight, and I've got a beer in my hand and some other things. So I'm not going to put that one up in the office. Yeah, I didn't take a lot of pictures then, and it was over close to 15 years now. So the cameras on the phones weren't that good, and people really weren't shooting everything at the time. Yeah, thank God.
What's the biggest hurdle that I know you said you got bodybuilders and you got athletes. Those people are driven, they want to reach their goals, so you probably don't have to coach them as hard as a normal person. So a normal person, what's the normal hurdle that they have to go through or that you have to help them get through?
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about the normal person, but I want to come back to the bodybuilders because I have more challenges with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Surprise!
The normal people, when I call it, the people that come in, my first hurdle is always overcoming what they heard from their buddy or the internet. The internet more so than their buddies, because a lot of times their buddies were the catalyst, or their spouse was that, hey, it's like, somebody makes a change and they're like, what's the human natural question? How'd you do that? Okay. So that was good. But the internet, like I said, there's a lot of information out there. And the way I've looked at it, because I went into IT right before the internet, the PCs and I guess business computing was taking off, and it was about 3-4 years later that the internet was there. So I've kind of, God, I really am old. So yes, I watched, I guess really what I'm saying is I watched the birth of the internet, and and as I've watched it, the information is there, but the marketing and advertising is right there with it. So, and that's the nature of it. I mean, we're a free capital society, and it's all about selling things. Everything from supplements to diet plans, and that's what sells is new. So my clients come in and they'll talk about like, well, or not even ask. They're like, well, I'm doing keto, intermittent fasting, carb cycling, whatever. And I'm like, okay. And it's like, great. How's that working for you? How long you been doing it? I've been doing it about a year, and they're like 60, 80 pounds overweight, so obviously it's not what I'm thinking is, how's that working for you? But I got to be a little more diplomatic than that. And I go, okay, that's cool. And I said, I want to show you some other things, and maybe we can walk through some things together. And once I start showing them their numbers and how things relate, in the very beginning when I started, I was way too technical. For one thing, this business I've always pretty much worked in back offices, as the data geek, or in executive boardrooms. I've never had a public facing job where I had to talk to people. And so I thought I'd be good at it right out of the gate. No, I wasn't. At first I was like not saying much. And when I started talking, it was all the techno jabber. So it took me more than a minute. Now, what I learned is that meet them where they're at and address their questions, guiding them back into, let's just focus on these fundamentals. And usually I've got to the point, and I'm pretty proud of this, is that it used to take, I was like, okay, I need to see this person like 1, 2, 3 times. Now I can usually win somebody over in 15, 20 minutes.
Wow.
Because I've learned to become a much better listener. And when they're telling me, I'll find something that I'll know they're passionate about, and I can show it to them how we're going to get there. So I can make it actionable. And that's one of my goals before someone, of course, I want to make sure they understand all the information and that they're getting what they're paying for. But I want to make sure that I've given them 1, 2, 3 things that are very actionable once they walk out the door. And I know I've succeeded at that if they're excited when they do walk out the door. It also means they're going to refer a couple of their friends, and I'm going to see them back, which is good. So that's part of the job that I really like. As far as the hurdles, though, it's like we can get too much information. When I have people come in that have personal trainers, there's a lot of great trainers out there. The majority of them are very good at personal training. Some of them are also good at nutrition, but a lot of them still are, handing clients their meal plans that their coach handed them 10 years ago. It's kind of a one size fits all. And that's the exact opposite of what we do. The plans that we do for nutrition, again, are very personal. They're very tailored. Each one is completely different than anyone else. It's based on two things: their body's metrics and the goal that they're trying to achieve. If we can line up their goal or their food to their body and their goal, then they'll get results. And that's why I like when people come in where I like to catch them when they just got started, when they got about a month in. They don't really know that much about nutrition, but again, like I started, they know to cut out all the crap, and they've done that. They've joined a gym, and sometimes if they've gone a little further, they're starting to get frustrated because I'm doing all this work and nothing's really changing. Those are my favorite people, because there's nothing worse than going, busting your butt, working out, and nothing's really changing. Yeah. And usually that's where us having the tools and figuring out what they're doing and what we really need to do can make a big difference really quick.
Do you cater to people with different diet restrictions? Are you able to do that still and meet their goals?
Yeah, yes and no. So if someone comes in, that's one of the things, first questions we have a standard intake form for nutrition like anyone else. Going to ask about food sensitivities, any known food sensitivities, and also what medications they're on. And generally, when I talk to someone about nutrition, I'll ask them, especially if they're over 30, when the question usually that's easiest where I can get them talking is, when was your last checkup and when was your last labs? If it's been pretty recent, then we'll go from there. If it's not, I'll tell them it's something you might want to look at. One of the things that I tend to find, as far as people either tend to go to the doctor for everything or they don't go at all. Some of my healthiest people don't. But as far as accommodating those, and now we're getting into the differences between nutritionists and dietitians. All right, so if someone has a medical issue with food, I'm definitely not going to tamper with it, nor are we qualified, nor do I want to be in that market. If it's being treated, then yes, we can work around it because we have their documented restrictions, and we also can work around that because we know it's going to be addressed, and we're not going to do anything that's counterintuitive to unseat that. We're obviously not going to change either medical advice. Now, people that have, for instance, people will come in and say, I've got a slow metabolism, I got a bad thyroid. That's when my question's going to come out. Have you had that checked out? And we'll find out. And if they haven't and they're suspecting it, then we'll definitely talk to them about it. And people, for instance, there's a lot of common things. And it's like recently, gluten has been a big target. So I get a lot of customers come in. It's like, I'm allergic to gluten. Okay. Are you? So I'll just use that as an example. What we find is that most people, there's really three grains that in the United States that we make a lot of, okay? That's soy, corn, and wheat. Most people can tolerate those things just fine. Now, it's questionable whether we were ever intended to eat them in the quantities that we do. Yeah. So a lot of people think they have a problem with gluten. And it's like, no, you really have a problem with eating too much refined food. Yeah. I do food sensitivity test as well, but about 50% of the time, if someone asks for one blind, especially if they haven't had any testing and I don't know what they're eating, I generally tell them, hey, when you come in for your testing, we'll talk about that. I had a call like that today because it's like, why? I'm really just trying to save them money. It's why do you want to find out some of the minutia if you know you're eating fast food and drinking beer? It's really, you may have some food sensitivities, but it's kind of like Stephen Covey's Big Rocks and Little Rocks. Let's work on the big rocks first. Okay. We got to get you eating real food. And then if we have some problems, well, let's take a look at the food sensitivity.
Well, that goes back to what you were saying about, crap, I forgot. It was a brain fart now. But you were saying we indulge too much and the sugars and stuff. Gluten, I think that's a selling point. That's what I was going to say. The marketing and sales. I think that's just a Ponzi scheme or a way to.
It is.
Oh, it's gluten free. Put it on the box.
Right. Well, I've had these conversations with customers too. So that brings up an interesting point. One of the things is carbohydrates. Okay, so carbohydrates have been demonized for quite a while. At least all the macros except protein have pretty much been targeted, which is, for a while back in the 80s, it was all about low fat because it's fat. So that, dietary fat must equal body fat. And then the carbohydrates. Well, there's really, the thing about a carbohydrate, there's really nothing special about it except it's what your body most readily converts into energy or stores as body fat. Now, there's a big difference between a simple carbohydrate or a simple sugar and a complex one. And without me going off on a tangent, a lot of us, myself included, thought that I had a problem with carbohydrates and I was sensitive to them. Well, I found out I kind of am and I'm not. I handle and tolerate carbohydrates just fine. In fact, I need them, and that's what helped me put on strength and muscle. What I found out, though, that I am in about the 35% of the population that simple sugars, just the way my body's wired, my insulin spikes. Okay, so two things happen when I do the simple sugars, and my insulin spikes. My metabolism starts to really slow down until my body can get it back in check, and also it makes me just crave more. And I found out pretty quickly that's one of the reasons keto is so popular with so many people and why it's so attractive. Keto fixes a problem with a hammer. All right, so instead of teaching people about the differences in complex carbs, that it's not going to trigger those things and you actually need them, it says, well, just don't eat carbohydrate. So what happens is, and why people like keto, is because it reduces those cravings. One of our biggest triggers is simple sugars. So when we eat those, again, I'm not alone. It makes us want more. So when people stop eating carbs, they start eating less. And it's the calorie reduction is what's getting them to lose weight, not any ketogenic magic.
And what like examples of simple carbohydrates, just so everybody can stay on track?
Oh yeah, that's a good question and that's often one I get almost on a daily basis.
A lot of people think it's candy, but it can be things we eat every day.
And the first things people think of when of simple sugars, they're going to think soft drinks, candy, pastry. Okay, those are absolutely simple sugars, but so is just about everything in the middle aisles of the grocery store. And that's going to be your crackers, your goldfish, anything, again, with those 3 grains I mentioned that's been deconstructed. Any of your wheat products, your chips, all of those things, they're just going to be they're going to convert to simple sugars very quickly in your body.
That's a good point. What you just said, everything in the middle aisles, because I forget where we heard this, but all the real food when you go to grocery stores is on the outside.
Yeah.
Like the fake food that most people feed their kids is on the inside. And me and my wife argue about that a lot. Is like, why do we need to go down this aisle? There's nothing down there that's good. Yeah. I don't need anything down that aisle. All the real food is.
Yeah, there's no need, but you want.
So we go down.
Get the goldfish, right? Yeah,
that's for the kids.
Or the chips, like my daughter's chips, which I have to stay out of. So yeah, that's and going back to meeting my customers where they're at recently. I'll do challenges where you'll have these weight loss challenges, and usually they're with gyms, particularly with CrossFit gyms. They like to do these challenges for the most muscle gained and the most body fat lost. And this time, this was a particularly health conscious person that managed a car dealership. It was Norman Freedy and Clear Lake. So anyway, completely different type of client that I got in there. Every one of them was like, hey, the ones that joined it, they were like, okay, I'm going to get behind this, because that's what they were doing, is kind of running a health and fitness campaign and they were trying to raise awareness for living a healthy lifestyle within the business. And I thought that was great. So I gave them a reduced rate and I wanted to be a part of that. I had about 30 of their employees. And they all came in. They're all really, really good people. They were all motivated, but not really, except for a handful, really said, I really don't know what you're talking about. So none of my canned or usual questions was I able to answer. So I figured out real quickly, I did use the grocery store analogy, because they're like, what do I eat? Okay, well, on the peripheral of the grocery stores where the fresh fruit and produce is and the vegetables, and that's where you can get your lean cuts of meat. and your quality dairy products. And then in the center aisles, it's pretty much, except for some staple foods like some whole grains and beans. Yeah, you want to, if it comes out of a package, a can, a box, or a wrapper, it's probably bad for you. And that really resonated. And I've seen some of these, we're starting to do the follow-up scans on these, and some of these people have made a pretty big difference just by, a simple awareness of like, okay, I understand what whole food is now.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. Whole food is not a trademark of Whole Foods. Okay. Whole Foods means something
what?
that.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I've been had.
So yeah, it was good. So yeah, we just, I try to adapt to who I'm talking to.
That's good.
What is the most, I guess with the weight loss ones, what is the most common thing you see out of some clients that come in that is just a quick fix? I'm imagining like there's a bunch of just overeating, and like maybe if they just it is overeating. It's two things. First off, we're getting back into the macro calorie thing. So that's another thing the internet loves to argue about. Only macros matter. Only calories matter. They both matter, and they're completely different metrics. Again, one's about how much, and one's about what it is. So we get a little of both. So for instance, a lot of people are overeating. What we tend to do, we all have these biases in our head. We don't think we're eating as much because we're measuring it by volume. When you're eating really calorie-dense foods, it doesn't seem like you're eating very much. Likewise, when you're eating a lot of fresh produce and you're eating lean cuts, volume-wise, it's a lot of food. And one of the biggest complaints I have with people after they start eating healthy is like, I don't have time, or it's hard for me to get all this food in. Yeah, that's kind of the way it was meant to work. Yep. That goes into kind of the way the food industry works. It's, I think probably since World War II, we've been hearing about food conspiracies. I personally don't think there's any organized conspiracy, but I do believe there's a recipe, and it's very simple. Fats and carbs are readily available. They're the cheapest foods. You strip out the fiber so it can be rapidly consumed, and you spike it with sugar, salt, and artificial flavoring. That's the recipe. So if you're living off that and you're only eating 2 or 3 items a day, it's real easy to get way too many calories.
The other thing too that you just reminded me of is if food lasts, like if it says it lasts for 3 months, it's probably not good food either, right? Like
yeah.
Like
talking about months. There's some 5-10 years.
Yeah, food shouldn't last that long. Like real food shouldn't last that long.
No, yeah, it's pretty perishable. So, I mean, there's some things in nature. I mean, that's one of the drying and curing. Dried beans last a long time too, and they don't have anything in them. But
yeah, and fermentation and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually just did like a Whole30 diet. Have you heard of this thing?
I have, yeah.
So it's basically what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Whole foods, everything on the outside aisles. It's pretty strict. And I normally eat somewhat clean. But the Whole30, after I went, 15 days in, I felt real lethargic. What is that?
Okay. Not entirely familiar with that. And actually, it's funny you mentioned
just
that.
Whole Foods.
Because I have recently had clients, and probably in the last 3 months, that I'm always listening for what's out there and what's new. But again, it's very hard to keep up.
Yeah, it's too many.
But that one's been coming up. And more importantly, what I notice is my people doing Whole30 on their follow-up, and I'll never argue with results. That's one of the things I tell my clients too. If you're doing some weird, crazy-ass diet I haven't heard of, and you're getting the results, we'll call it good. So anyway, but I did notice that, and it was just last week. I was like, okay, I need to dive into this and find out what it is, because it seems pretty sound from what my customers have told me and the little bit I know about it. So it's pretty good. So back to your question about the being lethargic. All right, so I went through this too. When we're used to eating simple sugars, it's basically a trigger, okay? And we crave it and we do it, and we're stimulating ourselves because all of it creates an enormous burst of energy. At the same time, after our blood sugar overcompensates, we get that crash. But it gets very, I'm not going to get into addiction models, but it does follow a lot of those patterns, okay? So there is withdrawal, and that can just last a few days for some people. For some people, it's weeks. I know that when, I stay pretty consistent. This year, I got kind of far off after the holidays. I don't really indulge that much during the holidays. And I didn't any more this year than I ever do. But usually I'll start cutting.
I like to stay around 15, 16% body fat, and that's not too hard for me to maintain. In the summer, I like to get down to around 12, which is a whole lot more work. And I kept putting it off. In fact, I was eating my meal prep food, but I was still eating a bunch of extra simple sugars and carbs, mostly my daughter's snack food. So my daughter eats, she eats very healthy, and she doesn't have a weight problem. My rules with her is that she gets adequate protein and she gets all of her nutrients, and which means a lot of produce, which she loves. So that's good. She gets to have more snacks. She's still growing, and her calorie burns faster than mine, so she gets to have the extra desserts and things. And I generally stay out of them. Well, I didn't.
And I do too.
Yeah. So I went up to right at under 18%. And interesting enough, I got in about 60 days ago. I got into a challenge with Philip.
What is it?
It was he and I decided to, because Philip was kind of doing the same thing I was.
Yeah.
Him and Nicole were going out a little bit more than they normally do. And Philip's he is working as hard as he always does. So we were like, okay, let's challenge each other for who can put on the most muscle and take off the most body fat on a scoring system. So we're coming in for weigh-in on the 25th of this month.
You better beat them. Yeah. You got all this tech, man.
I'm planning on it.
You can rig the machines.
Well, no.
If I can, he's in IT.
Yeah, we're not going to though.
Oh, Phil, you gained 14 pounds.
Yeah, beep, boop, beep, boop.
So I told Philip how he was going to beat me. I think I'm a little better at shredding than he is, but let's face it, Philip's jacked and he's 30. Okay, he's 30. I'm 57, so I'm not going to cut him any slack. Yeah. The way he could easily beat me is by packing on more muscle. Yeah. Okay, and lately I've seen him really pushing it at the gym.
Yeah, dude built like a freaking freight train. He's got the big shoulders, and he's just hot, isn't he?
God, we always get into this stuff. Multiple episodes.
Yeah. So anyway, so what happens is when we cut those simple sugars off, our body's like anything else that it likes. It's not only it's triggering those pleasure centers and saying, "What are you doing, man? You're killing me. Where's my sugar?"
I feel like it sets you on a different, like a new baseline too, because we're always kind of stimulated with sugars,
right?
And then we start getting real kind of slow, and
and
we think that's abnormal, but because we're always on a high with caffeine,
and your body will adapt. Yeah, and that's through. All of my, I haven't had like one journey. I've had several. And now that I get to watch this with my clients, there's never any one thing happening to us at the same time. But we do develop patterns. And you asked an earlier question about with my weight loss clients. What I figured out is it's always kind of a race. Last year I took a couple of online, it was like an online seminar. I just kind of looked at it. It seemed kind of spammy. It actually turned out pretty good. But it was about the difference between will and habit. Okay. So will is something that is very powerful, but it comes and goes. It just does in everyone. So while you have that will, it's the time to create that habit. So when my customers walk through the door, they're ready to move mountains usually. Because at that point they're motivated. They just joined the gym. They just, they've found, well, they may need my help with nutrition. They may be working with a nutritionist. I get a lot of referrals, from nutritionists and personal trainers. And but for whatever reason, they're ready to go. I know it's a race because I've got to help them develop a habit before their will fades. So that's what we talk about. Is like, how can we make that? Again, to make it sustainable, it's got to be something that we enjoy. Their trainers are telling them the same thing. Personal trainers are really good at it. I really don't know what other nutritionists, how they handle that or how they work with other clients. But I have figured it out pretty quickly. If I can get someone to start getting results, then it kind of goes full circle. It becomes recursive because all of a sudden the gym workouts that weren't fruitful are now paying off, which makes them want to eat cleaner, which makes them want to work out harder. So it's kind of like the old drug commercial.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Who knows?
Did I take myself out of the frame?
Oh, can you see it?
I don't. No, don't do it.
Yeah, I'm good.
Oh, you're good.
All right.
You're golden.
No, that's like the what is it? Like motivation and willpower. It's kind of the same thing, right? Like motivation is just there for a little bit.
Right. It comes and goes until our next motivation or demotivate or stresses come up. But if you get into a habit, it's like, for instance, when a long time ago when I did run a lot, I never a professional trainer, but I often had people that I did train help to start running. And I would help them avoid the same mistakes I made when I first started running. especially the ones that don't have the obsession I did. But most people, when they go out to run or do anything, they're going to go too hard, too fast. Okay. And then they're like, this doesn't feel good. And they don't stick with it because it's painful. And what I would tell people is like, I don't care how fast you run. I don't care how long you run. I want you to do it every day. Okay. And usually if I can get somebody to do, and I mean in rain, shine, whatever. Okay. Yeah. Apocalypse, zombies. Okay. If you can get them in for about 60 days, then things will start to happen. And then naturally they'll start running a little faster and a little longer. Myself, in the beginning, I never worried too much about speed. I was always trying to go further. I really, that was more my jam, was the distance, to see how long, and endurance wise I could push myself. But it got to the point and I found this is true in a lot of things. Once that repetition kicks in, it's the same. It's like brushing your teeth. You don't feel right if you don't do it. And we all have these little rituals before we go to bed too. You probably have more than you even realize. And some of them you're going like, why do I do this? Well, because I've been doing it for the last 15, 20 years. That's a habit. Yeah. So we can make that work for us.
And we talked to, we had Dave Rosenthal on. Do you know who he is? He owns Wild Pear Running and Pearland.
I know who he is. I don't know much about the organization though.
It's a shoe company store. They sell shoes and running attire, and they have a running club, and it's an awesome store. But he said something about running. Like once you start running, everything evolves around it. So your diet, then your sleeping habits. So then, like you said, a few days in or 18, 20 days in, you got good habits built all around running. So if you're constantly running, you have to do everything else in conjunction with that. So it's a good analogy.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of sports have that, but I'm not going to quote false studies I don't know of, but I would bet that running is probably way ahead of everything else. I've known more obsessive runners than obsessive other sports types.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other sport. Running does something to you. There's a brain chemistry thing. They call it runner's high. And after you've been doing it for more than a minute, you definitely feel it. And it's very powerful motivator. And yes, you do not feel right. You're not fun to be around. Yeah. You don't sleep well, and you're grumpy if you didn't have your run that day.
Agreed.
Yeah, someone's really grumpy. Let's get into the difficult bodybuilders.
Okay, the difficult bodybuilders. Most of my bodybuilders, again, social media. Okay, so a lot of people are coming into the sport. Some of them, what I found is, I would tell you this, I like about 80 to 90% of them. Especially when they're coming in, because they're motivated. They're going to be good customers. They're going to follow directions. The ones that I tend to not care to work with are going to be the ones that it took me a minute to put my finger on what the difference was. So people who compare themselves to themselves and they're using it to set a goal, they're going to be great. Okay, people that are comparing themselves to some Instagram influencer or some other superficial entity that's not them, they're going to be miserable, because guess what? It's a lie. And there's always, even if it isn't, and these are real people, there's always going to be someone better than you. And there's going to be somebody that's not as good as you. So if you're competing with yourself, you're generally going to be a lot happier. The other challenge that I have with them is that the ones that get into it, like a lot of things, again, with all the information now, all of the coaching and everything in life that's available, is they get too many opinions. And so I've learned to work around that too. I just don't compete with it. It's like they're telling, well, my trainer said this. What do you think? Do you want to hire me? No, I don't say it quite like that. But it's like I tell them, you got to choose. Okay, either you don't know how to do this for yourself, or they will. They'll tell me, well, I think this, and this. And then they're saying, but my trainer says this, and what do you think? That's a losing proposition. Yeah. Obviously, financially, it's a losing proposition, but it's a bad one for them too, because they're going to have to trust someone. You trust yourself, good. If you trust your trainer, do what they say, because there are some differences, especially. And I focus on nutrition, and I focus on the metrics, measuring the body. And again, I don't argue with results. I pretty much stay out of personal training. Now, because I work with over 40 plus different personal trainers, it does allow me, when someone asks, it's like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this sport, or this is my training style, or I'm looking for this type of gym. I definitely could give you a good referral. But overall, yeah, I love my competitors, especially the ones that are new, because it's a challenge for them. and we're pretty good at getting people where they want to go. And I also like the ones I personally get a different kind of charge out of the people that have been doing it for, when I say more than a minute, plus 5 years, 5 to 7 years or greater. I learn a lot from them, because that's one of the things. Let's go ahead and talk about bro science. All right. So,
now he's listening.
Yeah. So science is always going to go where the money is. All right. And it's always going to be, it's based on scientific methodologies based on empirical evidence. Well, you know what? That's too slow for a lot of us, myself included. You've got teams of people out there that are always willing to experiment with the latest techniques, the latest food type or food eating styles and training techniques, supplements, and yes, sometimes we're talking drugs as well. Okay, so there is a huge body of knowledge out there that you cannot ignore. Okay, and yes, it's anecdotal, but it's group anecdotal. Okay, you can get qualitative information from it. When I see people that are particularly following a certain style, a certain trainer, and their results are, and when I am measuring it, is statistically considerably higher than what I'm seeing other people doing, it gets my interest. I want to find out what's going on, which usually then the science is behind it. So,
yeah. Well, Mike, what I mean, you're 57. So for someone who is older, and you started getting in fitness, you said you were 43, right? When that light switch.
Right.
So some people, they think that they're too far gone. They're in their 40s too. Like, I can't start now. I'm too old. I didn't do it. But I think you're a perfect example of that. Starting late, and then look at you. You're a freaking bodybuilder now. How do you, what recommendations or what tips and tricks do you have for folks that are older and wanting to get into it and maybe haven't been a part of it their whole life?
Oh, I love that question. Okay. So when things we were meant to move. All right. We were meant to eat real food. You nail those two things. I'm a big believer in the Pareto principle, 80-20 rule. Okay. The worst measurements I have on any of my clients, regardless of age, regardless of gender, is sedentary people. Once you decide to start Netflixing and snacking,
it's fun.
Yeah, it's fun for a minute.
Chill is really fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
I got him with that one.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I'm not going to go there. Okay. So yeah, it's that I always knew that, always read that. I get to see it every day.
Yeah.
And so, but that's also a good place to start when I've got somebody and their numbers are truly terrible. And usually I'm not the only one telling them. It's like their physician just told them too, which is why they're coming to see me and what they can do about it. But like, for instance, when I'm measuring, the way we measure cardiovascular fitness is with a test called the VO2 Max test. And those numbers are terrible. Their RMR's down in the gutter. Their metabolisms are running really slow. Their body fat percentage is sky high. If I can just get them walking and we can cut out the fast food, some of the beer, some of the soft drinks, we get a huge net gain. And that's usually enough of a spark to create that will that was lacking. And then I can go put them into that habit pattern. Yeah. So that's my advice, is that keep moving. It's like when I tell people about strength training, it doesn't matter which gender either, but a lot of people say like, it's like, I don't want to lift weights. My definition of strength training is more based on sports science than it is about being a gym rat. By definition, strength training is doing something more with your musculoskeletal system than just carrying your frame in your day-to-day. So that can be done with body exercises, bands, and weights just make it a little easier. But we're not talking about a lot, okay? It should be, if we only have the strength and the muscle mass, those are the two biggest things that after, it is linear, but it starts to accelerate generally after, for females, after about mid-40s, and for males, definitely after 50. Is going to be calcium on our bones and atrophy of the muscle. And it's absolutely preventable. In fact, a lot of things that they thought were age-related, illness and pathology, is just really age-related thinking. I have lots of couples in their 60s, even 70s, that are extremely fit. You may want to stay that way.
That's something to look forward to, man. I want to be where you're at when I get your age, for sure.
I want to be there now.
Well, let's wrap this up, Mike. So how can people get a hold of you? What is your website and your social media presence?
So we're on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and that's Live Lean RX Houston. and you can get a hold of us. If you do a Google search for Dexa scan or live lean, you'll find me. I dominate the first page. I'm proud of that.
Love it.
Yeah.
We need to put a Google image of the good first page.
Yeah, and you can book yourself online, or you can call me, and I can do it by phone. But I took a lot of care on the website as far as making it pretty easy to use. And I know a lot of people make that claim, but I actually had user testing because I used to do that for a living.
I bet he has a damn good website.
Yeah. And I don't put a lot of crap on my site. I think I maybe have 16 blog articles, but they're all very useful. And it answers most people's questions. And our business model is pretty simple. We have an online calendar, and you can schedule yourself. And we don't even require payment until you come in.
Awesome. Well, I had a pleasure, Mike. It was fun, and we'll do it again, man.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Yep. Awesome. Bye.